Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Youkilis, and today I'm joined by Gretchen Marteney for her second Entangled interview. In this conversation, Gretchen and I discuss the rise in collective consciousness and the Great Awakening. Gretchen highlights how society is becoming more holistic in recognizing our interconnectedness. Next, we discuss Schumann Resonance and the starseed generation. We consider how the forces of empire have effectively implemented maritime law on the land and how we're now reverting to common law. From there, Gretchen discusses how the education system is used to get people to not enjoy learning and how the standardization of education was the beginning of the end. She warns against strangers raising our children and highlights that children are fundamentally of God and of their parents, not of the state. Next, we discuss the importance of physical development and why you should speak about things you want to change as if they were in the past. Gretchen highlights that intention is the energetic blueprint of all experience. From there, we discuss holographic blood and how healthy human beings serve as the basis of a functioning society. We then consider free energy, cymatics, telepathy, and epigenetics. Gretchen describes her ayahuasca experience and how the medicine enabled her to remove blocks from experiencing God. She describes her journey from being anti-God to now God being the central focal point of her life. We then consider the inversion of Christianity as a way to suppress its power and the nature of the crucifixion. We end the discussion on the viability of time travel, the strange author Ingersoll Lockwood, the nature of predictive programming, and why President Trump launched the Iran War after promising to end forever wars. This outro is titled Holographic Blood, the Universal Storyteller. Outros available for this and all episodes at entangledpodcast.substack.com with supporting exhibits and footnotes. Music from the show is available on the Spotify playlist Entangled the Vibes. If you like the show, please drop a 5-star review and subscribe on Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, X, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please enjoy the episode. Gretchen Marteney, welcome back to the Entangled podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see and hear you
Absolutely.
again.
You too. Thanks so much for joining the show again. I think it's roughly about 4 years exactly since we had our first conversation, so it's really fun to have you back on the show.
No way. We've gone through like high school again. Another 4 years of school of life, huh? Since then.
Yeah, especially at this unique time of history where it feels like time is really speeding up as the Great Awakening approaches. That each year is almost like 100 years, you know.
Totally. It feels like a lifetime ago that we first recorded.
Yeah, so that first conversation, I want to say, was a few days after Putin had invaded Ukraine. And so was one of the first 20 interviews actually recorded for Entangled. But, we ultimately ended up going down, discussing a lot of pretty deep and intense topics in that conversation. And, part of the format of the show is I write an essay at the end of each episode to really dive deeper into some of the main topics. And especially when we talk about episodes of government corruption of the highest order and false flags, things like of that nature, like we talked a lot about in our first conversation. I really like to put hard numbers and facts behind it so it doesn't seem like we're just talking out of our butt. And ultimately, it took me about 3.5 years to research all those topics. So it took me quite some time to actually publish that first episode. And that's why I thought it would be great to get you back on and just give an update for the audience on where you're at and get into some new topics that we didn't cover in that first conversation.
The new and improved and updated version and podcast. So happy to add to it. And also, that was my first podcast recording ever, and I don't think I was really aware of the settings so much, and there were some distractions there. So glad to be more focused and centered the second time around.
For sure. So why don't we kick it off talking about the idea of collective consciousness and raising frequencies and vibrations. I touched on the concept of the Great Awakening. What does that mean to you, and what do you think humanity is going through right now as we record in March of 2026?
I think it's a process that's been undergoing since the dawn of time, but what is accelerating right now is the raising of the overall frequency vibrational level of Gaia, so of Mother Earth and all of its inhabitants. So it's not only humans, but plants and animals as well. Um, and as evidenced by this increased solar activity that's bombarding the Earth and affecting the electromagnetic level, affecting everything. And so with this comes, what does this mean for humans? Um, a transition from one dimension to the next. They call the Great Awakening. The way I understand it is the transition from the 3D reality of duality and separation and zero sum game and competition and and shift to the fifth dimension, which is basically, they say the energetic matrix that held the third dimension in place broke in 2012. And so we've seen what we're experiencing right now is the slow crumbling of all the structures that were built from that place, as a new era is ushered in, where that duality is replaced by unity consciousness. And so as people start to understand more what consciousness is and how it's that same consciousness that operates through all living individuals, then that idea of separation and competition gives way to connection, unity, and collaboration. And the power of that is absolutely exponential. So with this, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2; it equals like 1,000. And so the world, um, as more individuals become empowered and doing our work to overcome our own self-imposed limitations and limiting beliefs and programs and habits. As we shed away that which no longer serves us, we step into our higher selves, our better versions, and from that create a whole new world, new institutions, new social relations, new mm, living situations, new anything and everything. So right now, I think we're living in this simultaneous where the 3D and 5D are coexisting together, but the differences are starting to become more and more stark with the passing of time as they continue to separate more and more. So there was an overlap for a considerable period, and now that separation, I think, started in 2012 when that energy matrix was broken, and as a result, now that's what we're going to be experiencing for the near future.
Wow. And you mentioned solar activity and its impact on this current rise in consciousness. Could you expand on that and what you think is occurring at the sun and how it impacts us here on Earth?
So they say like the Earth's heartbeat is called the Schumann Resonance, and we see
Mhm.
fluctuations in that have never happened before, and it's very, very, very regular. It's becoming much more regular, and so I'm just receiving this increase in solar flare activity, then, which is affecting this resonance, which is also inducing. Then we're talking about a shift in the pulse, and the Earth's
Mhm.
electromagnetic polarity is being affected. I mean, it's kind of like everything is being shifted inside out and upside down. And so Yeah, I think we're starting to have a greater understanding that we're electromagnetic beings, you know? Spiritual
Hmm.
beings living in an electromagnetic container per se that includes a meat suit, also known as the body. Um, but just how we're affected and how it affects our thought processes, our feelings, our physiology. Um, and sensitive beings have been aware of this for some time. Reading a book called The Invisible Rainbow, and they talk about neurasthenia, which is electrical sensitivity being reported in the 1800s. You know, when they first started experiments with electricity in people and seeing how it affected. And also with modern technology, you know, they're understanding, you know, the electromagnetic frequency of the earth and how if you go outside and you start grounding, you know, and they put people in even MRI machines, you can see the immediate effect because you put a grounding device connected to them and you can see immediate effects within less than a minute of how the shape of the red blood cells change and the flow of their blood and inflammation goes down. And so we're starting to then understand an expanded version of health too. Huh? Not health went from just purely physical health,
Yeah.
you know, am I fat or not, to to then mental health too. And now we're going even more expanded versions to spiritual health and even electrical health and, you know, uh, so more holistic everything. And we're starting to understand systems more with new modalities of therapies, you know, like systemic coaching and constellations. And so that same thought process is being applied to all fields of life. So we're becoming more holistic in general, understanding everything's interconnected and we're all parts of a whole. And it's all sending and receiving information and getting constant feedback. And so it's impossible to separate it all.
Interesting. And you mentioned the Schumann resonance, and a number of the anon accounts I follow on X track them closely, and will show when there's big disruptions or fluctuation in that resonance. But I can't say I really understand like what that's showing us, or do you have a thesis as to like are those human caused fluctuations in the Schumann resonance? Do you think that's Galactic Federation caused? Like, do you have any thoughts about what is causing those changes?
If there's additional um, factors that could be affecting it beyond solar flares, yeah, that's a good question. Understanding um, energy weapons and direct energy weapons and how um, military and intelligence communities have been using frequencies to create destructive weapons, and even to the point of provoking
Mm-hmm.
earthquakes and provoking uh,
Yeah.
very disruptive. I mean, in Canada, they even had um, little kind of flare guns that emitted um, microwaves, and people were burned. They couldn't see it. They couldn't hear it, but they're, you know, but they feel the immediate impact of the heat and push back. So, you know, that's taken to scale. And we have projects like CERN, which are, you know, scaled so much. You say, how much does the public really know? And uh, what's really influencing here? It's hard to tell because as soon as you find something out, you realize there's a hundred new questions that pop up that you don't know the answer to. And so that's the beauty, but also the trap of the rabbit hole, because the more you go in, the bigger it gets. So when we did our last
It only goes
recording
one
4 years
direction.
ago, yeah, I mean, I was like, you know, head deep in the rabbit hole. Um, they started doing, you know, my homework since I was 13, since 9/11 happened, and started questioning things.
Mhm.
And so after many, 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 many years, it kind of also, I'm starting to step out a little bit to focus more on, okay, now understanding that's kind of where this 3D world and how the current state of affairs came to be this way. Because we all ask ourselves, well, what, why all these problems exist in the world, right? If we have all these means and all this technology, like, why are we still dealing with these problems that many are becoming worse and worse? It's like, what's this idea of progress we're being sold, and really check the quality of life, like how many people do you know that really actually love their life? And what the message
Hmm.
of success that we're being given, and how so many successful people are now even committing suicide, and seriously like, wait, what? That doesn't quite add up. And so and so then I kind of stepped back from that, and focused more then on, okay, let's creation of the new world in this 5D. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Hmm. I love it. So let's talk about some of that 5D and creation of the new world. And maybe a good place to start there would be on human health. You alluded to how we're going away from we're just a big meat suit with no independent thought, no spiritual connection, to recognizing who we truly are. So, how do you expect that our understanding of health and human physiology will evolve going forward?
It depends on the generation you're talking to. They say all the children born after 2012 are also the starseed generation, so they're pre-programmed for this new Earth, I'd say. And then there's been light workers per se sent before then to help. So people who have remembered um, past, either past lives or people whose origin comes from further other planets and other places who've been authorized then to come down and also assist because the darkness around the Earth got to be reached a breaking point. So information that I've come across is from many, many, many angles has alluded to the fact that there is collaboration beyond our stratosphere, in order to help assist in this. And so with younger people, I think it's much more embedded in their psyche and in their beings. For example, younger people aren't breaking themselves in order to reach material success in a job. At least here in Spain, people are really, okay, are we going to stick to the terms of the contract? Because if I'm not being paid overtime, I'm not going to stay an extra 10 hours a day at the office like my friends did when we started working in their 20s to try and get some sort of leg up. So people are focused now on quality of life rather than just purely material survival. Even
Hmm.
as life is getting more expensive across the West, and housing prices and food prices are through the roof. But even so, there's this shift in consciousness that there's basically from survival mode to thrival mode. And so I think the more one understands consciousness, um, we're able to go to integrate, and go beyond our purely physical or mental level to include also the emotional and spiritual level. And as they become aligned and coherent, um, we get into co-creation mode. And that's been confirmed by quantum physics time and time again, um, that we are in fact co-creators here of this universe, that there's no objective reality. And so the general public is starting to become aware of these ideas and paradigms, but they've been known for thousands and thousands of years and been hidden from the general public and being used to the service of, mm, let's say, ego-driven or even people who have uh, aligned with fallen angels in the Luciferian rebellion. There's a spiritual warfare going on, and When you view it in terms of energy, it makes a lot more sense. When you see
Hmm.
how people's energy is siphoned off through systems rather than set to serve them. So the matrix is really really symbolic in that regard. So we're not in pods per se, but we're all kind of connected through these systems that are just completely sucking out our energy. Um, Whereas though you come across with a heart-led person and they come home at the end of the day with more energy. Hmm. Because what they're doing is in alignment with them, and so it's this give and take that nourishes the soul, and you can come home after a day of intense work and productivity and movement and still be full, but most people aren't. It's the exact opposite. And so this need to I need to not think, I need to unplug. People literally say they use the word unplug. It's curious. No word is in vain. Um, After 20 years of language teaching and understanding the power of words, everything started in the beginning with the word, right? So we think in words. All manifestation starts with words, and how words have even been changed um, to to set up uh, indirect agreements and contracts with people, unbeknownst to them. There's a thing called natural law or common law. Um, it
Hmm.
basically stipulates that there's two legal systems going on. There's in the United States, you have the what is lawful, set by the law, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and then what is legal, which is legislation, which is basically used to enrich the coffers uh, of the state machine. And because the basis of common law is that if there's no victim, there's no crime. If there's no threat to person or property or damage or loss thereof, then there's no crime. So if we think how much time and energy is spent to just support this, and in the United States, it's really a fraction, it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, but you come to socialist Spain and the amount of life energy that is going into supporting this insanely corrupt government and how brainwashed people are into continually voting for something that they knowingly don't like, but they're too hesitant or fear-based to try anything new yet. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, common law is an interesting field of
Hmm.
study. If becoming a sovereign being, um, you have to first free yourself from the unknown contracts you may enter in. So, I don't know how how many police officers might be listening to this, but Black's Law of Dictionary, Dictionary of Law talks about how the English language has been changed and manipulated over the past 400 years to enforce basically maritime law on the land. And so common law is the reverting back to that original one. So even just saying, if
Hmm.
you're asked, do you understand? The word understand means, do you stand under me? You know? Um, spelling is casting a spell, A TV program, it's called a program because it's designed to program you. So, I mean, I think to really continue down this path of awakening, we need to go back to study etymology, which used to be required in all schools until the 1940s. It was a hardcore pillar of education. And so if you look at everything that's been taken out of the education system and you ask yourself why, it's hard to say nowadays that any of us are actually receiving any type of education more than rather than indoctrination, you know. Um, so yeah, there's a shift in education taking place. So we're saying in health. in finance, education, those are in politics. The four main pillars. But first and foremost is health,
Yeah.
because without healthy people, I mean, we just look around us. Um, in the United States and across the West, people are worse off now than my grandparents' generation. That was a war generation. They lived decades at wars. And that was in the United States. In Spain, you had, the First World War, then a civil war in between, then the Second World War, and you're just so. I mean, say, and that traumatized generation was still somehow healthier than this one. So we really gotta
Yeah.
question everything and saying, is there anything worth saving of the way things are done now? What served you? And, honestly saying, because as a teacher, I ask myself, what served me as a student? And I
Hmm.
can count on one hand how many things throughout 12 years of schooling actually served me. But it's mainly just, right now, a way to get people to not enjoy learning and thinking. So then they have to go home and
Right.
unplug themselves, unplug the mind. So let's see. It's an interesting time to be alive. That's for sure.
That's for sure. And let's double click on education a bit, given that's been really what you've dedicated your career to and where a lot of your passion lies. What do you think have been some of those destructive changes to education over the last century plus? And what do you recommend going forward as ways that we can revitalize the field of education and really make it work for the individual?
I think standardization of education was the beginning of the end. One size fits all. Um, the modern education system was created in Russia 200 years ago, and that was to create factory workers, barely literate, functional literate factory workers. Dividing people by ages, having the bells, having children sit all day. I mean, I go and pick up kids from school, and they literally, as soon as they get out the front door, they drop their backpacks and they start running. And then and their teacher's like, yeah, he was, anxious and nervous today. And it's like, well, no kidding. You'd have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old sitting for 9 hours, because school here 9 hours a day. And it's just, and the biggest thing, though, the shift is that parents aren't raising children. You
Yeah.
have strangers raising your children whose values may or may not be aligned with yours. Because if the kid is spending more time with other people, then those other people are contributing more to their growth and maturity and development as a person than you are. So we really got to rethink this, how we're doing it. And I just remember sitting down all day and being exhausted. Our school started at 7:50 in the morning. Like, and you're going to school all day and then you have homework? Like, how many people who go to work are given homework then to do in their free time? Like, when is a kid allowed to be a kid nowadays?
Hmm.
Um, and to explore, and how much of life is actually designed for children and families. More and more people are concentrating in cities. Cities are the least hospitable place for children and families. There's like not a single part. You might have a business design once you walk inside of a place, like a children's play center or what. But the city as a whole is not designed for families in mind whatsoever. And so I think, um, and having children, being raised in ever smaller and smaller apartments, uh, it just kind of becomes a pressure pot for families. And when we were little, it was like, kids, go outside, explore, be independent, do your thing, be home before dark. And that's what we did. So, such a difference. I mean, unthinkable nowadays. But that would give us volition, independence, personal responsibility, curiosity, adventure, a taste of freedom. Nowadays, children are enslaved. I have children that ask me if they can put on a coat, if they can take off their shoes, and it's like, you know, They asked me permission. My last partner had 2 kids, and they would ask me permission to go outside. I was like, of course you can go out. You don't need to ask permission, you know? And so that sense of like volition is gone, all like, I mean, gone in many, many, many ways. And so you got to bring that back. And there's a lot of families that have recognized that and are designing their lives, because first you have to have time. And the single biggest complaint I see and hear of modern families is the lack of time. So if we also think
Hmm.
all this supposed progress, and how does that equate into quality of life? Well, people are un, um, nobody's rested. Nobody's Fewer and fewer people are cooking their own food to rinse and repeat, to just be exhausted and go to the next day and do it all again, and take your kids rush to somebody else who you don't even know what they're doing with them and the message that they're sharing. I had dinner last night with some friends of friends, and there were some teachers there, and it's like, mm, do the parents know that you're teaching 12-year-olds about masturbation? You know, like, and would they agree with that? And
It's
and
crazy.
so as an educator, yeah, I want to get the state out of it, which, in the US is more accepted, but in Spain, the Spanish mentality is, daddy state needs to give permission for you to breathe before you can do anything. Um, And so to
Yeah.
have parents basically in collaboration with teachers and students to design tailored curriculums. So we already see there's international, jet set families that have been doing this for a long time. Um, Using resources to hire private educators and adapting to their needs. And so as more and more people see and experience the failure of modern education, um, then there's becoming more of a demand for it. And so I say, okay, how the
Yeah.
question then becomes of how to make private education more affordable. I mean, in Florida, what did I read last year? My mom was in Florida. 15,000 students were taken out of public schooling, and out of all schooling to be homeschooled. Um, because there's a lot of, there's all schools under the sun, but there's a lot of atrocious things being done at a lot of schools. And parents and educators used to protect children too, but we don't see that across the board. And so people are looking for alternatives. And the only constant in
Yeah.
life is that of change, right? So I'm on board with change. I'm willing and able to adapt, and I understand the primal role of the parent. Children are first and foremost of their parents. Hmm?
Hmm.
They're of God and of their parents, but in no way, shape, or form of the state. So get the state out of education. Here in Spain, I collaborated with a forest school for 3 to 6 year olds. It was a German dude, took 20 years to be able to legally set up that forest school. And it's for people who aren't in the legally required age for education yet. And it's still, and he used all of his own resources. And you're just like, even still. So you have a group of private individuals financing their own thing with children who are still not in the required schooling age. And even so, it takes 20 years of a legal battle to get that set up. So you get a little idea of how the total lack of freedom and options here in Spain as compared to the States. Which, I've asked myself a lot. Could have this project, my education project, set up in a week in the States. And I thought, it's already going on there. Maybe there's more of a need to to direct my efforts here. So yes, there's a reason I'm still here.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about what the project is that you're working on.
It's kind of combining values of homeschool education while creating what was first a complementary to traditional schooling. So, um, as offered in either like a weekend or afternoon, evening courses and workshops and classes, um, for students and for families, is kind of combining first and foremost, I've seen after 20 years of the largest sociological study of the Spanish society going into people's and homes, the biggest impediment to learning is emotional distress. A person can be physically present, but if they're emotionally distressed, then they're mentally completely absent. And so then if you're mentally absent, information doesn't enter into your awareness. And so it's just a massive waste of time. So that's why you can give somebody, because I've had students whose parents have given them all the best resources in the world, and they did not serve the child at all because they were under this emotional distress. And so it's like, okay, we need to go back to square one, start, all right. And if you see then, statistics like the largest killer of people in our society at the prime of their life, 15 to 40, is suicide. And then the news isn't reporting about that, which isn't working to dissuade people, which is supposed to be the logic behind it, if it's still the number one killer. So we need to say, all right, as a safety measure, we're teaching people like CPR. We need to teach people emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. And also it becomes even more relevant in this era of artificial intelligence, where now computing is much, 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 much faster and efficient than us. And so, all right, what do they not have, at least yet? Emotions, which colors our experience too. And if you combine it with all the quantum studies and understanding then how we create our reality and how emotions color it, and you can have different people in the same exact situation with literally polar opposite experiences. So understanding that and say, okay, what are the tools and resources available in order to, what's the end goal? Because there's no single definition of success like it was in the past, but definition of success in terms of how much do you love your life, and which is peace and prosperity and purpose. So peace, purpose, and prosperity. That's it. And so you say, okay, what is the first step? And plus, if you just look at, basic physiological development of a human, our prefrontal cortex doesn't start to develop until after we're 12. So how can you teach, or at least think it's reasonable to teach children anything based on logic before then? They don't have any logic. Hang out with some kids for an afternoon. And then I had a 6-year-old whose mom says he hates science. And I'm like, well, let me see what he's doing. And he's 6 and he's doing science in English. And one of the concepts was distillation. And I asked the mom, I told her, this is one of the things he's supposed to be learning now. And I said, tell me what you know as his mother about distillation. And so who thought that was a good idea to put that on a 6-year-old's vocabulary and topic list? And so kids here, basically education is still based on memorization of facts. And so it invites the question of what is knowledge? Knowledge in the past was the accumulation of data when data was not easily accessible. But now we have a plethora of data, which is flooding us. And so now what becomes relevant is finding information. Knowledge is finding information that is relevant to your point at hand, your situation, and your intended outcome. So first you have to know what your intended outcome is, which most people don't know what they want because we're so distracted by outside external factors and causes that no schools or institutions are teaching children, hey, look within. What is incoherence? What is alignment? What does it mean to think, say, and do the exact same thing? And how you avoid internal conflict by being coherent. And that external reality is a reflection of your internal one. So if you want to change something in your external reality, okay, what change can you make inside? Imagine what the world would look like if children are fed those messages from the time they're young, and you have respectful education that is tailored to each one. So being able to, in a private setting, I'm able to see individual limitations and identify limiting beliefs. And then help children, and also then help the parents, because I'm in their homes and saying, hey, and in constant dialogue with them, and it becomes the team effort that it used to be in the past, where everybody's aligned in the best interest of the child and the family. And so it's a complete I have friends with children and they are unhappy with something at the school, but they feel disempowered. And it's like, well, I can't do anything about it because it's this kind of monster of an institution and things are too hard to change. Well, all right, if it's too hard to change, then out with the old, in with the new. Let's create something new. And I
Yeah.
think the setting needs to change. There's such a disconnect from our environment, which is nature, that first we need to reconnect with our home. And because it's the context in which we have our experience. So first, our environment as we learn about ourselves, and then in order to be able to connect with others. And so to do that on those three levels, and then also on the levels, then holistic education, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. And you
Mm-hmm.
see, children need to have physical development. They need to work on their dexterity, their flexibility, their strength, their body control. You see, there's these videos of 3-year-old Chinese kids that are like, not, I mean, the typical Asian, like the little karatekas, and that they're cooking up a storm and sewing. I mean, they're more functional than most adults. So
Yeah.
if you hold, and there's this saying that people don't perform to their potential. People perform to the expectation placed upon them. And this was what evidence, Thomas Jefferson's mom received this note from the teacher, that the son had, given to her, that Thomas had given her, saying it was only for her to read. And she opens it up, and Thomas asked her what it says, and it says, that this school isn't a good fit for you anymore because you're too smart for it to be here. And you're outperforming. And so then they're inviting you, in order to, and so the mom set that bar of his potential. What the note really said is he was being kicked out for underperformance, but he
Mm.
believed something else, and that opened the door to his greatness. And so understanding that our beliefs govern our lives. And so these beliefs are acquired when we're young. And if we have conscious educators, helping children from a very young age to create the most fertile ground possible, in terms of instead of a hostile world, well, they say this is a loving world, and so where safety and security, and so they can maximize their potential and thrive rather than focus on survival. Because the messages that society is giving the younger generation through media is very, very doomsday,
Yeah.
very dark and very separating, very, just really, really dark energy there. And so kind of is basically a revival, of like what it meant to be normal in the 90s. Just like an average Joe in the 90s is somehow radical now, you know. Just be a good a good person, a good parent, a good citizen, a good neighbor. Um, but in order to do so, people have become really, really disconnected from themselves. And so this is okay. How can we reconnect, become coherent, aligned, and then how can we up our frequency to maximize our experience? Because we're not here to just merely survive, to get through a day. No. We got to start by changing the discourse. So something I do with all my students and clients is anything they want to change, to start speaking about it in the past. You know, as if you start to
Mm.
separate that from your current reality, and so yeah, it's really exciting because everybody I talk to is really, really on board with the idea. Um, and parents, students, and neighbors, community members at large. And if you look, I live across the street from across the road. I live on a farm, 150-hectare farm, with horses, cows, sheep, donkeys, chickens, geese, dogs, cats, tons of rabbits. And it's across the road from a jail that holds the corrupt politicians of Spain. And that jail is nicer than any school, any public school. A lot nicer. And they have more privileges, you know? And so we need to, I would, and if you compare and contrast, I mean, schools in Madrid, They have cages and even barbed wire, and they're very artificial, you know. There's no greenery. Uh, and so also to basically undo this idea of keeping kids inside, after collaborating with the forest school, it was hands down very clear the difference in the development of a child who spends all day outside in nature. And even things like the story time at the end of the day, it's 1 hour of a made up story where the started by the teachers, but the children participate. And what that does for imagination, you know, that's incredible. Because all the solutions to the futures, to current and future problems, is through the use of our imagination. So we really gotta bring our imaginations back online and get out of this, like, you know, everything is about rational productivity. It's like, no, let the robots do the productivity now. We got to get back into our creative expression, you know, as human beings, and literally and bring the beauty back into life, because everything became so functional. Just the world became, you know, a soul-sucking cage. If you look at most cities, they're just so ugly and depressing. And so it's like, okay, how can we bring the beauty back to make life inspiring, divine, and sacred again? So yeah, a lot of work to be done and this is happening in small pods. So basically starting schools in farm schools, um, people homeschooling on homesteads, but getting children outside first and foremost, and then tangible life skills as they develop all these areas of their being, in a greater context. So it's like, why memorize useless data and not know how to have a conversation with your neighbor, you know, or not be able to identify anything
Right.
like why do children know exotic animals but don't know 5 animals that live in their habitat, you know? But everybody knows elephant, giraffe. I was like, well, how many elephants and giraffes do you live with? There's some horses here with particularly long necks, but I'm still not seeing any giraffes around. So it's like, okay, well, let's kind of bring common sense back, you know? And it's like, all right, before I start learning about stuff really far away and irrelevant to my life, let me learn about what's actually going on in my day to day, you know? Um, parents complain about children contribution in the home. Why not start with how you run a household? Everybody lives in a home, right? So like basic life skills. Fewer and fewer people know how to cook. So if parents don't know how to cook, then they're not teaching their kids how to cook. Then where do they go? How do you start? You know, it's like we have to bring this all back, with different values. So, you know, are we cooking to fill our stomachs? Are we cooking to get pleasure from the taste? Or are we cooking for health? You know? And so
Right.
what intention, to basically bring intention to everything, because intention is the energetic blueprint of all experience. And so what we've seen is a world that has just been too unintentional in too many areas for too long. And collectively we've gone on or to the wayside. And so only by suffering the consequences of that are people kind of shaken back into, hey, let's rethink this and realign it with who we are and our intended desired outcome. So let's bring intention back again.
Yeah. Make intention great again.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I fully agree with that, right? As within, so without. And it's a very important concept that's been lost on the modern world. And it gets back to our earlier conversation as it relates to health. And the last time I saw you, you were talking about a book you'd read called Holographic Blood and how much of an impact it had made on you. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on what you learned from that book and why you think it's so transformative.
I've read a ton of books on different paradigms and understanding of health, you know, because throughout I've kind of done like a meta analysis of life and society since I don't know, since high school and continue to do so. And seeing then what's the basis of any society is first healthy, functional, human beings. If you look on Maslow's hierarchy of needs too. Um, and seeing then so many people that are unhealthy, and that's if you're in a state of dis-ease, that controls your thought process in your life. You're putting all of your energy and tension there. So you're not co-creating, you're not even enjoying. You're usually just, the bare minimum survival mode. And so you say, okay, is this what we're here for? And if not, then okay, what other alternatives exist? But to know and understand, you say, okay, how do I understand health and how do I understand disease? And if the previous paradigm is producing a lot more unhealthy people, well, you know, any thinking person would say, hey, does this serve us, or is there changes that, need to be made? And if you go to, okay, are we going to solve a symptom problem? Is it, the way the healthcare system is designed in America because of the HMOs, blah, blah, blah? Or does it go deeper than that? What's the root? What's the root? What's the root? And the root is how we conceive. And I teach a lot of doctors too. So I've also seen, and they work in the public and private system, and there have been some, very notable named clients and who have a lot of influence in discourse and policy too. And so when you see then how people think and how they conceive of illness, and then how the modern system was created, with allopathy, with surgery and drugs, and it's like, okay, petroleum-based drugs are removing that part of the body. Is that really the answer to the question? Once you start having a more holistic understanding, you say, there's an analogy. If you have a moldy peach, if you cut off the mold, that doesn't eliminate the conditions which created the mold. That just cuts off that piece. And so you get mold again, either the next day or 2 days later. So it's kind of the same theory, It's like, oh, why does cancer come back? Well, because the root wasn't treated, you know?
Right.
And so holographic blood, man. And this came out 20 years ago. This is insane. If there was real freedom of speech, I think more people would know about it. But if we have all these modern telecommunications, but we've seen a lot of censorship going on. I mean, to the point where the sitting president of the most powerful country in the world was censored. So you can see that censorship has been hardcore and real. I mean, in the UK, there's so many people being arrested for tweets. And so we have to ask ourselves, then, I think a lot more people would be on board if they had access to this information, but they think that we live in a free society with access to free information. So first you have to say, okay, what information? Where's it coming from? And what else may be out there? But holographic blood, they found in live blood samples. This is learning how to basically read live blood samples, but they find holographic images of the diseased part of the body in the blood, which is they're bigger than the vessels, than the size of the capillaries that would contain that droplet of blood. And so it's like, okay, how is this how is this here? And they found that it's a holographic image. So basically the baseline of that paradigm is that from the time we're fetuses, we live in a harmonious union with something called an endobiont. It's a microorganism. They're microorganisms in our body. And all living things, and not just humans. And that so health is homeostasis. We're in balance with our environment. And so when there's an imbalance, the endobiont has to adapt to survive, and the cellular waste that produces is what we call disease. So if we treat a symptom of the problem, for example, if you have some sort of, let's say, a stomach issue and a parasite, and you treat it with antibiotics, but not going to the real source, you're pushing illness deeper into the body. So it starts in our outside and moves its way in, as the endobiont has to adapt in order to survive. It's pushed further in. And And so we see then the natural progression of disease from bacterial to fungal. And that's why they say they're finding fungus in all cancers. And to really then understand how we're accountable for our own health, you know? It's like, okay, if we know what we know and understand from the quantum reality, if we're not applying this in 100%, it's like, no, this works for me in this field of life, or this sounds good here, but no, it's either it is the paradigm or it isn't. You know, you can't pick and
Mhm.
choose when to apply it. Like at work, but not at the playground. Um, and so understanding then that our body is experienced in our mind, and our mind is experienced in consciousness. And so if illness is dis-ease, is not being at ease, is some sort of imbalance in the terrain, first in the terrain or in the terrain of the mind, no, the terrain of the body, the terrain of the environment, or the terrain of the mind, or all three.
Yeah.
Disease is our body's way of communicating what our conscious mind isn't, willing or able to see. And so we can treat disease as some sort of random occurrence, or we can understand it. Everything is information, and all information is relevant. The universe, works.
Hmm.
In Spanish, they say "por y para nosotros," which means for and for us. It's always supportive of us. It's always inherently expansive of all life. And so knowing then, okay, this disease is here to serve me. In what way? To show me what? What is out of balance? Huh? Either within me and my environment, or within my mind, body, and environment. So the quality of the answers depends on the quality of the questions. And so if you change the questions that we're asking, instead of like, why me, and then, okay, put our own well-being in the hands of
Right.
strangers, which there's many, many well-intended people, but for example, doctors nowadays, they spend so much time filling out paperwork that they don't have a lot of time to really explore the newest developments in their field. I've introduced to students the latest developments in cancer treatment using ultrasound that not only is non-invasive, it's called histotrypsy. Not only is it non-invasive, but it strengthens the T cells in your body, which are the basis of the immune system. So it's a cancer treatment that literally annihilates the tumor immediately with zero intervention into the body. So it's done from outside, and you come out with a stronger immune system. Like, why are we still poisoning people? And so there's more and more people then waking up
Yeah.
to, you can only use a tool if you know it exists. And you can understand it from a mental level, but until it really sinks down into your heart, that it permeates your being, you won't operate from that level. So one of the big differences too, since we first chatted 4 years ago, when my understanding was still, at a mental level, of many paradigms and theories and whatnot, but life and God has taken me down a path to help me integrate this information. Um, through difficult life experiences and even fun ones too, like having my first ayahuasca trip last fall. That was a total game changer. And so now we're also understanding then the power of consciousness, and then also how it can be manipulated in order to expand it. With
Yeah.
these resources that have that are healthy. We don't need to go down the toxic path. Is basically kind of all we've got. So much toxic buildup in our bodies and in our minds and in our hearts. We kind of need to detox individually and collectively. We all kind of reset. And so that's what this
Yeah.
year 2025, was a year 9. That's the closing of cycles. And so this is a year 1 here. A lot of people are changing, shedding that which no longer serve them, individually and couples, and and collectively. And so, and that change keeps accelerating. So Also due to a lot of people sharing information like you on this podcast, you know? So, okay, what are the mainstream, outlets not discussing?
Right.
So,
All the
is
important
all of
things,
this
things that
relevant
actually matter.
information? There's some
Yeah.
new information, like the quantum world is new, but it's connecting with the ancestral information has kind of been,
Mhm.
kept either at bay or hidden or just, dormant for all this time. And so humanity's been around for a long time. People have accumulated a lot of knowledge. Um, and so when that's built upon, then the learning curve is just, cut so short, but that's if we use it. And so, as the systems are all changing, I think one of the fundamental parts um, is free energy, and then the
Yeah.
shift in the financial system. But free energy, I mean, we had societies of the past that knew and understood this very well.
Just look at the
And
pyramids.
yeah, yeah, and you say, oh, what are these cathedrals that have all these cymatic, frequency patterns, and what do they
Wait,
know
you're
about?
saying those weren't just built with stone and chisel?
Say that again.
I said you're saying those weren't just built with the hammer and chisel?
Yeah, some donkeys pulling that on, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so there people are connecting. There's a program here in Spain, in Madrid, that teaches children to read with their eyes closed or covered. So
Wow.
clairvoyance, clairsentience, so telekinesis, all of these, which, the Shaolin monks were doing thousands of years ago. It's like, bringing that back into collective awareness again. It's like, hey, we're actually a lot more powerful than we're led to believe. And we're not here just like some animals meant
Yeah.
to survive a mediocre life until we reach, a diseased end. So many people have like old age associated with disease. Like people have normalized it. It's not normal. Like don't normalize what's not normal. Normalize he- health and wealth and abundance. In all shapes and forms. Connect with the people who are living their best years in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, not the ones that are dying and decrepit. Like, follow the people you want to be. Because before it's, oh no, but, this is, it's like condemning themselves to this common reality. But now we know there is no objective reality. And so you get to choose your own timeline of reality. And so choose well. You're going to choose from the frequency you're at. So then
Yeah.
understand what frequency is and how to raise it. So you're vibrating high, and then you attract different people and experiences into your life. Mm. And it's a stark contrast once you start learning about it. So I had this project in 2014 with a friend and business partner. We published the book Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins in Spanish, and he created the first map of consciousness. Um, and so that was also a huge part of the path in of understanding predominant states, emotions, and the view of life, the view of God, the name of the process, and that basically by eliminating these blocks that we accumulate over the years through through blocked emotions and also limiting beliefs, then we can kind of clear ourselves out of these energetic blocks, which prevent people from living the best version of themselves. And then also we're starting to understand the
Absolutely.
interconnectivity of everything and systems, because people, it's like, who doesn't go to a shrink? But you can go to the psychologist for 20 years. Like, uh, and so now
So
also
we're
then the
working for
world
you
of
then?
coaching is growing and expanding. And say, okay, people go to a coach for a little bit, but you say, but maybe you're working on a topic and it's like, I'm not getting it, I'm not getting it. And you're like, boom, constellations. This could have been my ancestors' problem that I've inherited. which I didn't know where the heck it came from because it wasn't mine to deal with. So now we even have the tools to ask, is this mine or is it not? And a very clear example, a very famous example we see, so the premise of systemic work is that we all belong to systems. Systems exist within systems. Each person has a role, and there's a hierarchy in the system. And if the role or the hierarchy isn't respected, then an individual problem will occur as the solution to bring the system back into balance. So a very famous example is the late Queen Elizabeth. Uncle abdicated the throne to marry an American and was basically shunned from the family. So his place in the system was not honored and recognized and honored. So then that system seeks to heal itself. Why? Then they bring Harry. Fast forward. This is all documented. This is what epigenetics is. So how experience is passed down through our gene expression. So it's also experience is locked in our DNA. And so Harry then goes off. He
Yeah.
marries an American girl and shuns the royal family. And it's like rinse and repeat, same thing, same system. So that's just a very famous example. But there's a million under the sun. And so coming into these modalities also helps people to heal, because in order to really thrive, first we need to heal. So that's how I think is going on collectively now, is this physical, mental, and emotional healing. And spiritual healing, because there's been a huge attack on spirituality as well. On God in general. So it's like, bring God back too. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on that note, you mentioned your recent ayahuasca journey and how impactful that was for you for your healing journey. I've talked on this show about my own experiences with psychedelics and how those have influenced my life as well. So I'd love to just get a little bit more of what that journey really meant to you. How did you decide that you were ready for an ayahuasca journey, and any major revelations you want to share either from that experience or post the experience as you've been integrating what you learned?
Yeah, that was, October 18th, 2025 was the most important, impactful, and enjoyable day of my life. That was the second day of a
Wow.
2-day ceremony. In somewhere in Spain, I'll say. And I had set the intention years ago after having taken other psychedelics and had very positive experiences, but had a lot of respect based on the stories that I had heard and information I had come across, and the intensity of the experience. Kind of this portal to the soul, and then also could be physically much more impacting, and also mental. And so I kind of set that intention, but didn't seek it. I just it's kind of one of those, if and when I'm meant to experience it, then the right time and place and people will appear. And so that came this last fall. The most powerful person I've ever met in my entire life is Colombian Taita, they call a shaman. And I was advised to set an intention for the experience. And so I was very clear about that intention, and it was to remove any and all blocks into knowing and experiencing God. And holy cannoli, was that wish granted. Above and beyond my wildest dreams. It was a 2-day ceremony. We started at midnight in order to reduce sensory input, to facilitate going within. And the first day was kind of leading up to the second one. So the first one was kind of anticlimactic for me, but the second one was just, I was in direct communion with God and my deceased father, and it was the most beautiful experience I've ever had. Crying absolute tears of joy. It was the most beauty and joy I've ever experienced in my life. I fully immersed in God's complete, unconditional, divine love. And then the not only the understanding, but the experience of the absolute perfection of everything. I mean, experiencing the perfection of war, you know? Before I'm an Aries, you're the dragon, I got a lot of fire in me. Before it's like my mission, I gotta go out, you know, heal the world, help the world, solve the world's problems. And after this, it was like, oh man, it's all perfect. It's all completely perfect. And so just the absolute gratitude um for that. And then my, messages from my dad and where we're from, you know, being a little coming from another planet originating, so it was like answering one of these questions of where should I buy some farmland? And it was like, don't get too attached to any one part of the earth, because you're just a temporary. So, okay. And other messages too about, with my personal life and how it's all connected to other signs and symbols. And so after that, it really, really, really does a lot when you experience the inherent perfection of everything, then there's like, really, what do you have to worry about? Absolutely nothing. And so if you just make all experience about becoming as close to God as one can, because it's the ineffable joy and bliss and love. I mean, there's just no words for it. Absolutely no words. And so that I had a tough year last year with a lot of shifts and transition and changes. And so, in one particularly trying moment on this very rainy day, coming home at night, my motorcycle, all my groceries had spilled out on the dirt road of, of the farm I live in. And there's horses and animals. I had to go back out in the rain, and find all this broken glass and, for like a mile and a half. And it was just kind of like, what else could go wrong in my life? It was like nothing was working. And I remember going down on my hands and knees and just, handing my life over to God. And it's like, wow, everything just went so much better since then. Like, don't make it about me. Just make it about how I can serve God. And then the places, the people, everything, the situations I'm brought into, um, are on a different timeline. It's much more in alignment and much more fulfilling. And so I think as part of the consolidation of that, experience, that was in March, and then the ayahuasca was in October, and it just kind of consolidated that shift in my being, which I had been, after being really, really, really skeptical, and is an understatement. My mom made me go to confirmation class, and I was like, okay, you can make me go to confirmation class, but you can't make me get confirmed. We had to write a 2-page paper about our beliefs. And I wrote a 4-page paper on the scientific creation of the universe. So I was like a hardcore, God ain't real type. It's like the effects of God are real. I didn't know that. But so did a whole 180 because I'm a seeker of truth, and so I just keep asking. And I'm willing and able to change my mind and my position about things. And that's, the beauty and the source of all growth. And so I used to be totally like anti-God, and now God is the focal center point of my life. And thankfully so.
Yeah.
And
Same.
so grateful to, I mean, because the question I think people it's, they say, do you believe in God? It's like, you believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, but for me, it's, do you know God? And so, and once you know God, you can't unknow God. And so then it totally changes your outlook. And so,
Yeah.
and then how does that permeate all other areas of life and all systems? And so, I think this is one of the main shifts too, because unity consciousness is God. It's being in oneness with God as source energy, call it whatever. And I used to have Uh, and depending on the circles too, because there's this like hardcore anti-God movement as if it were like a bad thing to say the word God, you know? So you don't want to offend people. And that was something, for me to work on. And also part of the journey, but it's like, yeah, when if man is not subservient to a higher power, that opens the floodgates of the ego. And we see then everything that, that's done and led to. It's like, so, okay, so do we want to keep going down that path, or do we want to stop and rethink and reset and reorganize, and take a different path? And I think that's what a lot of people are doing,
Yeah,
individually, and as we come
totally.
together, then those who say, okay, we want to create new systems that reflect that. So, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of God, I'd be curious to know what are your thoughts on Jesus Christ and what does Christ mean to you?
So I'm in constant reflection analysis. So if you ask me now versus in a year, it could change. I think you have the person of Jesus was the most perfect human to exist. Um, as a gift from God to demonstrate our potential as humans to embody divine qualities. And so basically, he was the one who completely overcame the ego and completely
Hmm.
overcame the limitations of the body. So, the 3D terrain, he was able to through his connection to source, um, connect with pure energy. And through that, I mean, that's what he was able to manipulate matter, and that's what we call miracles. Mm. And
Hmm.
had the wherewithal, presence, and understanding to be in. Now, how much of the story is historically true and how much? I think there's a lot of symbolism too that has been
Hmm.
implemented. That is, if you really think about it, like what communion is, like what we're drinking the blood and the body. That sounds more like a ball ritual than
Totally.
than something God would want us to do. So I think Christianity has been perverted to serve in other interests as a way to limit the power that it could have. Hmm? Um, but I do think uh, that Jesus existed, and I think the Bible has been, mm, changed, edited, rewritten. Parts are left out. You have entire the Book of Enoch, like one of the most important ones, was like left out. So I don't read the Bible because I just think it's
Hmm.
so far from what the original essence would have been. Um, but to connect in a personal way with Jesus and with the human embodiment of God as he was. And so I do accept Jesus as like my Lord and Savior as the in that regard, but am weary of, especially in Spain, there's only the Catholic Church. So it's in the United States you have
Hmm.
so many more options, which have evolved and connected more, I think, with uh, real human needs, and that's why they're thriving in the States. Any church you go to here is practically empty and full of septuagenarians or octogenarians, and you have these priests. It's just pure ritual, and it's like they don't even, when you say, why, what are you saying, and why are you saying it? I was like, I don't know if they'd be, those are so, but yeah. And I think the symbolism too, like, the whole cross thing, mm, as being the symbol, it's on one hand it's powerful, but is it the most powerful one? Is that the way Jesus would really want to be remembered? You know, how much of the story and the symbolism was corrupted to disconnect humanity rather than uplift? Still under investigation, but I think a lot. So that's why you have the power. The Vatican is
Yeah.
so powerful. You know, how is the most powerful institution on the earth is the church, and there's so much secrecy. It's so much. Then you say, okay, who are they serving then? Because it ain't humanity. So, and that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Even as the Pope changed the calendar, you're like,
Yeah.
why are you going around
I
changing
think
the
that's all.
calendar, man? To
Yeah.
disconnect the
What are you
original.
adjusting for, huh? What's going on there?
Yeah. So if we question things and say, okay, well,
Yeah.
how was this done before? Oh, why was this change implemented? Okay, who does it serve? Hmm?
Hmm.
Now we start asking then, who does it serve? Whose interests are served here? And we see sometimes it's very, very obvious, like we saw this week, in the United States with the State of the Union. A simple question. Are the people tasked with serving the American people actually serving them before non-American people? And they revealed themselves. So, there's a lot of outing that's happening. Uh, just as
Yeah.
people are starting to question, because before everything was just taken for granted. Everybody thought that integrous people like themselves were creating institutions and executing, them, but turns out not so much in many
Yeah.
areas. So, and the
Yeah.
religion isn't
Yeah.
exempt then. Religion was a massive, massive, massive tool. So that's why I kind of, you know, organized religion is a thing, but I'm more of a spiritual Christian, let's say. Because I have Christian values and beliefs, but, um, and I love to practice them in a community here, but I haven't found a community or a church that connects on that level like I have in the States. So maybe that'll be
Yeah.
my next project here. Who knows? Maybe Preacher Gretchen one day.
I could see that for sure. And I think that's all really beautifully said. And it's really interesting your point about the cross and the symbolism there. And I've thought a lot about that, and there's specific reasons why I wear an ankh instead of a cross, right? And I've been thinking a lot about the nature of the resurrection in particular, and the nature of death, right? And I think you're spot on in that the idea that a lot of Christianity has been adjusted or diverted from the true meaning of it, right? And I think with as it relates to the crucifixion of Christ, a lot of modern Christianity has really been shifted to focus on the suffering and how he died for our sins and the physical aspect of it. But for me, and the reason I prefer the ankh over the cross is I think the infinity symbol at the top of it really represents the eternal nature of Christ and of God, right? Of our soul, and the idea that yes, there was obviously brutality and suffering in his manifest life, but that is not the true nature of who Christ is, nor is it who we are. And I think it's more important to really understand our soul and our spiritual ascendant nature. And I think that's really the lessons that Christ was trying to impart on humanity. And I really view him as kind of the initiator of the Great Awakening. And now is the time for us to fulfill that prophecy that he laid forth.
For sure. And that's like, he spoke in parables and consciousness speaks in symbols. And so it's this, like, it's direct because it's in your face, but it's indirect unless kind of how to decipher it. And so once you start learning more about consciousness and how it operates, and then the importance of symbols and the energetic impact and weight, and you just don't take them lightly or for granted anymore. And you say, okay, mm, what symbols are where and to what end, no? And what effect does it have? And when people it's constantly like re-energized, 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 you say, does that serve our highest good, the absolute highest good? No? What is the energetic kind of blueprint of that? And can it be replaced for a higher one? Hmm? So, yeah, there's that's a powerful symbol too that you have then around your neck. And quite different. You see, speaking of it, because I was in Lourdes in France, and you see it here. So you have this one. Look at this symbol. This is the modern one.
Mm-hmm.
The classic one. And then look at like the difference between this symbol. You know, like
Yeah.
how and just check how it makes you feel. This one versus, I mean, you can't. It's kind of hard to see, but this is gory.
It is.
So and so you say, okay,
It's a form of
uh,
cognitive-based mind control, I think you could argue, right? A classic form of it.
yeah, yeah. And so we understand, like, basically, the consciousness and energy has been understood by groups and people for millennia. And so as it's been withheld from the public in order to manipulate us at our expense for the power and control of those who know and understand. And so, call it the occult practices but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so once you start understanding that, then you look into symbols and you say, okay, what symbols are fed throughout the mainstream into the masses, and what does it really do to our psyches, to our subconscious, because 95% of our day to day is run by the subconscious. And so we're bombarded with input, which most people aren't aware that it's programming their subconscious, which is then from the place from which they operate. And so now we're starting to really be aware of these symbols, and you're like, holy cannoli. Do I really want to be energizing or having that impacting, Because if this is keeping me here, now if I want to go here, then okay, what could be more uplifting symbols and powerful symbols? And see then what sacred symbols from other periods of time were, and different understandings. So, I mean, there's not just one church, there's 1,000 churches. What are the different symbols they've all used? How is it connected? And I mean, if you really think of the story that we're told, the Immaculate Conception, the birth on the 25th, the cross, the resurrection, da da da. And like, okay, how much of that is rinse and repeat of Horace? And how much
Right.
how much then are
Totally.
stories just copied and adapted in order to continue this a discourse that's really probably less true than not, in order to keep people on an incoherent timeline, like just the story of history.
Mm-hmm.
History is the etymology is his story. And there's even a word called herstory, which means her story.
Mm.
So you just view them, okay, so we got different stories. So as we just, question, there's not one history. A very interesting
Mm-hmm.
book is called A People's History of the United States. Um, that is a total game changer in terms of the version of U.S. history. And so you have the same events,
Mm.
but taken from minorities, or people not in power. Maybe they were the majority in terms of, women. Maybe there were more women, or the indigenous tribes that roamed America, and how the U.S. government didn't fulfill any of the agreements and treaties that they had signed with them. And so,
Yeah.
how righteous was then you know, the mm, the people who came before? And you say, okay, so everything depends on the angle with which you see it, and this is corroborated with the quantum world. You say there's not just one story, there's not just one reality, and that's why the powers that be also know and understand. If you repeat something enough, it becomes real. And so we're just
Mm-hmm.
force fed the same messages over and over and over and over again. And then anybody who questions them are silenced. And so this is how you get narratives. that are really, really, really off, really off, like COVID.
Really off.
But then, unfortunately, then you have the mm, collateral damage of that way of thinking and operating, and then okay, that kind of shakes people up into awareness by they start questioning. And so, in the
Yeah.
end, if you look into a context that's great enough, huh, everything is at the service, and there's a place for it and a reason for it. And so that's also kind of
Yeah.
why I've kind of been stepping out of the rabbit hole, because I'm no longer, with the understanding. It's like, yeah, all right, you got our society basically rewards psychopathy in
Mhm.
positions of power. So in
Mhm. Mhm.
corporations and in government. So on
Mhm.
an individual level in the street, it's completely abhorrent and shunned. But in these places, it's been exalted. They have
Yeah.
the Wolf of Wall Street, and it's like, you're a bona fide psychopath, man. You should be locked up. And those are the people. Those are the people calling the shots. Well, those are the people who have sold themselves out, to be manipulated and call the shots for, I think, other people are running the show behind. Because that's when you have people voted into government on a platform like Obama. One of the main proponents of his platform in the 2008 elections was to bring the troops back from Afghanistan. And so people voted
Mhm.
him into office for that. Well, there's no mechanism that actually ensures that what you're voted into office for, you have to do. So what did he do? He went and did the exact opposite. He sent a lot more. And then what did the institutions do? They're like, Nobel Peace Prize, you know? And so we're just not like questioning everything. And then as new information surfaces, Louis Pasteur, his deathbed confession, he's the father of germ theory, which is the basis of the modern narrative of what illness is. Germs don't make you sick. It's called terrain theory. His deathbed confession
Yeah.
was that it's the terrain. And his family kept it from his diaries from the public for 75 years. Why? Because they milked that cow from his fame. Luc Montagnier won a Nobel Prize for discovering AIDS. He got another deathbed confession. Good. His conscience weighed too much. Good. Their conscience did. At least it came out, because most of these people don't confess. And that's just the power of the ego. So then you say, okay, all the
Right.
worldly riches, which is from Faust. Actually, that's where my name comes from. In the play of Faust, written by Goethe, the German writer, Faust sells his soul to the devil for all worldly knowledge, riches, and fame. Because it's fun for a while, when you
Mhm.
have your ego rush, but then boom, there's always a longing. As long as you're disconnected from God, there's a longing. Well, guess what the name of the girl who went and saved Faust's soul from the devil? Her name was Gretchen.
No
So,
way.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that's a role in my role in the world now is to help, just like
Yeah.
my soul. I had to be broken in order to break what wasn't working, to break the dysfunction, to break the egoic
Yeah.
patterns that kept me back and kept me disconnected from myself and others, in order to connect with God. And I think that's the essential longing that we all have. Mm.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Hmm. So, if I could shift gears a little bit, I'd love to ask you a two-part question on another topic.
Mm-hmm.
First would be theoretically, do you think it's possible to time travel? And if so, Do you think that there are factions of the military and intelligence community currently involved in operations that involve time travel?
I think the possibilities on this world, planet, dimension are infinite. You have to be obviously fully stepped into your power, and so you see the example of Jesus in that regard. Um, are people doing it? Unbeknownst to the general public, obviously, this is like the Spanish mentality. When Spanish people come across something cool, they don't share it with their friends because they think everybody will do it, and then I won't have it for me. Huh? Plus, I mean, this is this would be a massive, massive tool of control. And so, if the ego is still serving, egoic patterns are still mm, in power in the world, and obviously the people who come across it uh, wouldn't share it with the masses. So, do I think extraterrestrials are real, that there's intelligence outside of this planet? Yeah, there's a zillion galaxies, and there's a zillion planets, and there's tons. There's the Book of Urantia. I don't know if you've heard of that, but, if you want to go down another really big
Mm-hmm.
rabbit hole, it's kind of like the the interplanetary story with God in it and Jesus. So it's pretty
Mm.
it's pretty incredible, but there's also corroborates. So yeah, is there intelligent life for me? Duh. And
Yeah.
also the messages I've received, in the ayahuasca ceremony, which are direct. Okay. Then and then all the secrecy. I mean, look, with Roswell and the Area 51 and all that. Has there been reverse engineering? Yeah, man. The Earth is very, very dense. We think we're intelligent, but we're really, really not. I mean, really not. Just look at the Darwin Awards. It's a website where people die really stupid deaths. Like, we're really.
Mm.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of strange coincidences, like the book about Baron Trump written in the 1800s, and then Donald Trump's uncle,
Yep.
John Trump, and his, connection with Tesla and how he inherited all his work. And then, so, there's no such thing as coincidences, is all I'd say. And then we have all
Yeah.
these,
I,
a
I
random
agree.
sudden interest in Greenland. And is it for the reasons that we're being told? It's not coherent. It's like, if you listen to the official story about how 9/11 happened, it's just not coherent. And so then you say, okay, well, there's gaps here. And what could fill those gaps? So I'm not saying I know what fills those gaps, but I'm open to the possibility for sure. And I think that the the power of energy, the more of that I learn and experience it, there's no end in sight, which is a beautiful, incredible, amazing thing. And we're just putting it to the service of light. It's been at the service of evil for a long time. So as
Mm-hmm.
comes more and more to light, but also with our understanding of consciousness now and how timelines collapse and past, present, and future is all connected, then it's like you can already time travel in that regard. You don't need to go into a vessel and be taken
Yeah.
to like the 1800s so it's also, how do you understand time
No,
travel
that's the time machine.
and time in and of itself, and what time and space is? Is it continuum? Is it vacuum? There's people, with out of body experiences. So, okay, if space is no longer a limitation, then is time. And time is a social construct. Like, what is
Right.
time? How your understanding of time. The most impactful moments of our life pass literally a second seem like an eternity. And our experience that way too. So it's the way experience is so subjective and tangible and changes that. Yeah, of course, there's a lot more tools and paintbrushes to to play with than we've been led to believe. And so who knows? We already have people flying in drones, we'll be flying.
Mm-hmm.
And what they've been doing with, particle acceleration, who knows what's really going on with CERN there. There's a lot of other explanations of interest about what may be going on there, but it's like, they've been trying a bunch of stuff for a while that on an atomic level really it shifts reality. And so let's see how much of this continues to get out, and then also how much our ability to understand and grasp it all, because it's a lot of information. It's a lot, and one thing is on a mental level, but another thing, the experiential level. And so it's a process to embody it. And so I think that you don't experience it until you embody it. So one thing is, I heard about it. One thing is I can process it. I understand it. Okay. So I think until it's embodied, it's just like a figment of the imagination.
Yeah.
Like all these, mythical and mystical things that we've been told is not real, like dragons and unicorns and other creatures and goblins and giants. And it's like, if you just look at movies, people aren't that creative. Like people's imaginations aren't that creative.
So
They're
there's
not able to
8,000
come up with shit.
Marvel
And
movies.
so they're just like based on what was, and then okay, things are phased out, and so then you just do a bunch of book burnings, and then it seems like it was some sort of magical invented thing. Okay, but then you say, maybe there's more to this than we were led to believe, and maybe the true story is the magical one. Because once you
Yeah.
go into consciousness studies and learn it in energy, it brings all the magic back to life. I mean, it's like, we become the Harry
Yeah.
Potters of the earthly realm. Yeah, super cool. So of course, time travel. It's only a matter of time.
Absolutely. And it's funny you talking about how what starts as fiction becomes reality, and you point to that book series that was written about Baron Trump in the late 1800s by an author named Ingersoll Lockwood. And, you fast forward to today, there just happens to be an aerospace contractor called Ingersoll Lockwood, heavily tied to the Space Force. And, if folks aren't familiar with them, I'd recommend checking out their website. They reference the books of Enoch as an important reference guide. So all these things, as abstract or mystical or beyond the pale as they may seem, they have a lot of interconnectedness. And I think, to your point, what starts as fiction often becomes fact.
Completely. And often everything is like a reflection of what's been discovered, and it's kind of like a slow release to the public. Predictive programming, so if you incorporate it through entertainment, then it kind of creates then the narrative surrounding the thing, and so you get to choose the discourse of how the public will view it. And so if you're continuously fed, this is sci-fi, this is sci-fi, this is sci-fi, well, then the collective consciousness believes it's sci-fi. But then when you see, corroborations between like pre-scientific cultures, and you're like, oh, what's this battery coming out of Iraq that's 3,000 years old? Or
Yeah.
still don't have any clue about the pyramids, like,
Yeah.
and then you're like, well, how is it that the
We
Simpsons get
happen to invade
successful?
Iraq just after.
Everything to happen is like, okay, we'll just watch the Simpsons and say, what are they going to tell us next year? All right, the alien release, okay, and then after the meteorite scare, okay, fasten your seatbelt, and then look at the mainstream news. So yeah, we see it's all about the creation of the narrative. And so as more and more people understand that there is a distinct effort to get people to think a certain way at the
Yeah.
service of who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah.
Um, and you're able to start disconnecting. Once you disconnect from that, you connect into all the all this other information that's always been there. And it's a lot cooler and lot nicer because it's not the whole scare tactics from the mainstream media to get you into a lower frequency and the negativity through violence and anger and sex, debase, and sexuality. And so, yeah, yeah, is that you unplug yourself from that matrix and ask what else is out there, and it's a beautiful place with a lot of tools and resources and a lot of wonder. It brings the awe and wonder back too, and brings the magic back. And it's like, oh, can people levitate? If you can levitate, we can feel. I mean, you had Soviets in the 30s with Kirlian photography. You can see the energy and stuff. It's like, why are we not studying the manipulation of energy? That's what Jesus did. Those are miracles. Like, let's
I
do
know.
miracles. Let's make miracles like an everyday thing. You know, they've seen that when groups collectively pray, there's a massive impact. They saw 1 million people, school children in Thailand, meditating together, and the criminality around all the major cities in the world tanked that day.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, and so they're starting to
It's wild.
understand. I think we're at the bridge of science and religion. They're starting to understand that prayer, the power of prayer,
Yeah.
is the power of quantum manifestation. It's setting that intention using our higher faculties, which, the abstract mind that animals don't have. That's what makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're able to create our reality through what we hold in mind, but people don't know and understand the importance of thoughts. So I'd say the first step into consciousness studies is to start observing your thoughts. And then learning if the body is experienced in the mind and the mind is
Right.
experienced in consciousness. You start then observing your thoughts. You're living more and more and more from consciousness rather than believing the voice in your head, which is the accumulation of programs. And so ask yourself, of all those programs, which ones are serving me and which ones don't. And do I choose to believe that first thought that comes in, or am I going to create the reality that I want to believe about it based on how I want to feel about it? So this happened to me once. Uh, I bought this beautiful secondhand table that I was restoring during the pandemic, and it had this hand cut piece of glass in this very unusual shape on top after I had like sanded, painted, varnished everything, ready to go, ready for my first dinner party out on my terrace. And I was in an online class and the wind was blowing. All of a sudden I heard this loud sound like bah! And this sunshade that I had on top of it, one of the corners had gotten loose, and this metal harness just went boom, totally shattered the glass. Like didn't even use the table once before. It broke right after I had finished restoring it. I was like, how do I want to feel about this? I want to be at peace. And so then I put my mind to service of my heart. Okay, start thinking about explanations of this that make me feel peace. My mind goes, brrr. Now it's lighter and easier to move. Done. This is how that served me. So I don't never felt upset about that. And it's true. Right? It's true. Just everything's true. So this is true and this is true. Say, okay, well, how does this make you feel and how that make you feel? And you get to choose. Because your feeling is your awareness of what frequency you're on. So if you're on a negative frequency, hey, jump to a positive one by the power of your consciousness, conscious observation of our thoughts. And so the intellect, if we use like in Hawkins scale of consciousness, the tools that help us to get from A to B become our biggest impediment to move from B to C. So the mind helps us get out of the body, the higher states of being from our merely animalistic self. But then our mind becomes our biggest trap in getting us into our higher self, our conscious awareness. And so the mind can be a huge trap. And so it's also that awareness saying, okay, that identification with the mind. And then how disconnected from the body we've all become. And so this is also then bringing
Yeah.
this awareness back through tools, resources, which now have been on the fringe, but they're becoming more and more mainstream. And so as adults are healing themselves and discovering these modalities, I also want to pass them on to their kids, because the best medicine is preventive medicine, right? Why pay for 20 years of therapy when you can just make sure the field is fertile before planting any seeds, you know? And so
Yeah.
it's cutting that learning curve back at the service of these new
Right.
generations. Before we were here, the super strict parents, and we went here the way to, wild child parents. Now we're kind of going back here in the middle with all these. And that's happened collectively too for everything. Go into balance. First, we have to go off to one side, over to the other side, to say, okay, back here in the middle. Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. So next topic I wanted to get your thoughts on was around President Trump's geopolitical strategy during his second term, right? So we're about 15 months in at this point. I think there's been 8 conflicts that he helped to settle, but also there have been some things that a lot of his supporters weren't as excited about, right? Things like striking Iran's nuclear facilities and then capturing Maduro in Venezuela. And then just this past weekend, launching more strikes against Iran and taking out the Ayatollah. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on all of that and how you view his administration thus far in light of trying to end the forever wars and usher in an era of peace.
Yeah, it's like what we were sold in the 90s. Now we're gonna bomb foreign countries for democracy. But is that the same? I don't think so. I think that we're not given even a fraction of the relevant information at hand. I think we're treated collectively as children, and that there's kind of more of a Machiavellian still worldview. There's the framework that the media shares, like on a national level, Republicans versus Democrats on the international level. But I think if we start to really look at the policies and who they're meant to serve, and you say, I think we have different interests opposing interests at heart. So we really have a globalist versus a patriots type, in its most basic sense, because obviously it's more complicated than that. And it's like the more you start learning about it, the more you realize you don't know at all. And so I think that 99.999% of what's actually going on is being kept from the public. So what's the greater context of this? You say, is this random, like world policing, and we're going to be taking out the bad guys, or is there something deeper going on? And how does it connect with this shift that we're talking about into more expanded consciousness on a global scale, and kind of breaking the chains of control that we've seen in these really ancient societies too. And so, and all the potential that has yet to be released. I mean, they're talking about, South America being the next powerhouse of the world in terms of human potential and resources. But you have all those narco states there. It's just been keeping everybody in such a low state. I mean, if you're fearful for your life, if you can't walk on the street, that's hardcore survival mode. But then, if like them or hate them, Bukele turned around a country in literally 2 years from being one of the most dangerous to the safest. So Does it just require and the international community request intervention when, the media purports it as a good cause? Uh, like help the Palestinians, but it's wrong to, get Maduro out of Venezuela. It's like, well, are we coherent or are we not coherent? You either do or you don't. No, this selective, well, in this case, yeah, but national sovereignty like isn't a thing, but in this case, it is. And so, um, but understanding then these power structures as they start to surface through, the Epstein files, that there's these power structures that are literally underground that are not seeing the light of day, and that there's literal entire underground cities. I mean, under the city of Kansas, I don't know, the National Archives are held under the city of Kansas, which has like greater surface area than the above ground city of Kansas. And you're like, wait, how many people knew that was there? It's hundreds and hundreds of miles. And it's like there's entire, so what's really going on here? I think it's part of a bigger question and discourse, and it goes much, much, much deeper than the mere power politics that were shown on TV. So, do I know what it is yet? No. Am I open and curious? Yeah. Am I actively exploring now? Not so much, because I'm more focused on my own individual projects. And really, it's like now I have this understanding that the 3D world of what it is and how it worked for a long time, and I just choose not to be a part of it anymore. And so it's like I don't also have as much of a need to explain it like I used to. And I'm more directed on, okay, where do I want to direct my energy? Because what I do with my energy and what's relevant to me. I don't live in Iran. I don't know people in Iran. What's relevant to me is this farm, the area around me, first and foremost, and this city, and what I'm doing with my life. And if and until that's completely, manifested to its max, which will never happen, because you're always, you do one thing and then you seek the next. That's like, we get to choose in where we want to put our energy. And so I used to be really, it's like, I have to know, because, as my world understanding came crashing down. And so I used to stay up, in high school many, many, many nights, because reading, holding eyes open, because I couldn't sleep, basically, because of my world was being turned upside down. But once that happens enough, you're like, okay, so this is the way it works. So what do I do? That explanation is total bullshit. That the true deal behind it will probably never be known to the general public, or not for a long time. So how much should I continue busting my balls about trying to figure it out? I'm a U.S. citizen, but I'm also living overseas. And so, and I think Spain has a lot more problems, and those affect me more directly than Trump's intervention in Iran. I also think this is one of the tricks that the media uses. It gets people more focused on international politics to the exclusion of their own national politics, which does affect them on a day-to-day basis. So I think if and until people are fully on board and participating in their national policies and saying, okay, this is being done with intention, and to what end, and who does that serve, then the whole forum, because can we really stop it or affect it? What mechanism, how much power do people really have in the public? How much are elections manipulated? How much? So how much will understanding it change anything? Don't know. But before me having full understanding of that, would I rather have an education system that actually serves humanity and that lifts them, so that by the time that these people are grown, will they be playing the same circus we're still playing and having this conversation? Hopefully not.
Yeah.
you know, about having to intervene because we'll just be on a completely different timeline. So, but we're in this period of transition. Who knows how long this transition will last? It happens in
Hmm.
pockets. It's not uniform. It'd be two steps forward, one step back.
Totally.
Um, there are really, 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 really living outside of the states. What I've learned that the U.S. Constitution is such a sacred document,
Hmm.
such a sacred document. Um, and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, how one nation under God. The fact that the United States is one nation under God has energetically put it in a really powerful position from which it became the hegemon of the world. Has the U.S. been
Right.
usurped by globalist interests? Yeah, we've seen. Imagine what, the U.S. national budget, half of it being spent on servicing an illegal debt and the other half being spent on um, for financing foreign wars and destroying and rebuilding other countries. Um, how much could all of that investment in the United States create an insane, amazing place? I mean, the U.S. is crumbling. So yeah, how's that been usurped? Yeah. Um, but people are starting to wake up and even question, like, what is the legality of this basis? Show me the law that says wage earners have to pay income tax. Huh?
Hmm.
Because that's an exchange. That's not profit. And that's a lot of people are starting to, question that. And so it's like, okay, well, if that's where these people get their power from, and that starts to dwindle just by that awakening. So that
Yeah.
you just basically unplug your mind from the system by not by
Hmm.
choosing not to believe it anymore. You believe in something. So that so do you really need to know all the ins and outs of every geopolitical move? It's freaking impossible. Impossible. And what they're telling us, I think, is like the Disney version that's watered down. But I've been to Cuba. I've seen, I went to Cuba in 2020. When you see people living in abject starvation, and poverty, seeing all these 20-year-olds with completely swollen bellies from malnourishment, then you say any change is welcome and good. So what is going on there is not serving the highest good.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm more of a proponent. Keep trying new things, try new things, try new things, vote for new candidates, vote for new parties, try anything and everything that's new, because if you know the old one doesn't work, then why repeat it? So I'm usually,
Yeah.
welcome in um, these changes. I do think that they're minimizing civilian casualties like they did with Venezuela. And so, if this would have
Hmm.
been, like you said, what was that? The Israeli nuclear policy kind of, all right, let's go down, everybody go down. As long as it's not that mentality, then
It's an option.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm, welcome any very corrupt regime change. Now, to assume that it's going to be for a better one, don't, no, don't assume that at all. But then we have the message of Trump saying, Iranian people, take back your country. So it doesn't seem like this is looking to be a prolonged foreign war and intervention that we saw in the
Hmm.
90s, which was to justify filling the coffers of the congressmen companies that they were boards on. Like Dick
Hmm.
Cheney's Halliburton got an $80 billion
Smuggling heroin out of
contract.
Afghanistan.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, the whole weapons of mass destruction narrative was just total bullshit. And so you just say,
Hmm.
who's benefiting from this situation? Yeah. And so I think it's still fresh. Everything's easy in retrospect. So let's see. Also, as time goes on, the different players push up against each other and see what comes of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. We'll see what comes of it.
basically we saw this, massive centralization of everything was just um disconnecting people from themselves, the their land and each other. And so, and we see that then the policies created really, we're asking who do they benefit? Um, there's a mass migration. Spain's countryside used to be very prosperous, and cities, small towns and cities used to thrive. And you can buy entire town in Spain for less than 100 square foot apartment in Madrid. I think there's an active, agenda to push people. I mean, and if you look at, I don't know if you can tell that there's a very different palpable energy in the city, and they become denser and denser and denser. And you compare these with
Yeah.
studies done with rats, and they see when there's overpopulation that they go freaking crazy, and they start killing each other. And so you see all these problems that come with um, uh, this overdense living distribution. And so I think I'll gonna head back out, and if we see this, like we said, this new world being created, and so institutions are all changing, people are coming back to be more sovereign of their own lives. Yeah? And so we see then it's
Yeah.
foreign intervention as well, uh, into other states where we have these power structures in place. So it's the crumbling of these old power structures that were in place that may have benefited society at some point at some time, but nowadays we see they do more harm than good. And so people are becoming more aware and started then to create their own destiny through intentionality. So they say, okay, what are my values? What's my intended outcome? Okay, let's create an intention and do this for ourselves and then collectively for society. So they're becoming kind of uh, the captains of our ships again. And so, yeah, it's a exciting time. We have this action reaction. So blessed politics are also part of the awakening process.
They are. Amazing. Well, Gretchen, this has been such a fun conversation. Did we cover all the topics that you wanted to hit on, or did we miss anything?
Ah, there's an infinite world of topics, but I think we got the right topics for this one. Hopefully the next one won't be
For
in too
sure.
long a time because let's see, the next 4 years, I think the world will be completely unrecognizable to to the one we're living in
Totally.
now. So looking forward to seeing then what that what that next podcast may look like. So thank you very much for having me. It was a blessing and a joy to share with you. And thank you so much for existing as a platform, taking the initiative, mm, not only to expand consciousness through your interviews, but to do it in a based and researched way also with the essays that you then write and publish. So it's really to do it from a place of integrity. Um, as I believe and feel that your goal is to, lift our brotherhood out from the darkness into the light. And so how do we do it? Connecting with the light and seeing then, okay, where is the darkness shedding? And saying, okay, let's bring some light there. So I think you're a fundamental player in this process, and I thank you for it and and appreciate all your hard work and effort.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate those kind words, and I really appreciate you joining the show now for a second time. I guess technically a third because the first one was recorded over two times. But no, I mean, outside of that, outside of the amazing education you bring to my audience, you've been just a tremendous light and source of guidance and strength in my own journey. As you mentioned, you've been down these rabbit holes for quite some time now. So I've really appreciated and benefit all that you've been able to teach me along the way.
Oh, well, it's been a good cosmic, cosmonaut intergalactic travel partner. So let's keep zooming through the universe, checking out the views on the way. So big hug to
Absolutely.
you.
For round
And
three, we'll have to, you too.
until
Yeah,
next
and I
time,
was just going to
dear.
say for round three, we'll have to do it in person. Yeah.
That's right. Third time's a charm. So we'll get we'll get access to the time traveling machine, and we'll collapse time space. And yeah, from Madrid to Denver, we'll meet for lunch.
Just travel by wormhole.
Yeah, that'll totally be our next one. Can't wait. Looking forward to it.
In my conversation with Gretchen Marteney, we discussed the idea of holographic blood and the theory that our blood encodes everything we need to know for living healthy and curing disease. In Dr. Harvey Beagleson's 2007 book, Holographic Blood, A New Dimension in Medicine, he presents this alternative medical paradigm based on live blood microscopy. Beagleson is a conventionally trained physician who spent decades with dark field microscopy. He invites us to look at a drop of blood not simply as a fluid stream of cells, but as a dynamic holographic field. A living storyteller that encodes the entire organism's physical structure, energetic interference patterns, emotional history, and adaptive terrain. Beagleson reports that under specific lighting conditions, the blood reveals crystalline-like symplasts, or biograms. These are not circulating physical objects large enough to cause blockages, but rather three-dimensional interference images. These images map organs, scars, dental tissue, postural misalignments, and sustained emotional states. He and others demonstrate consistent correlations. A patient's repeated history of trauma, infection, or structural injury appears as matching patterns in the blood, and those patterns shift when the underlying field is addressed. Supporting ideas include terrain theory. The internal environment determines microbial form and behavior. Pleomorphism. Microorganisms adapt rather than remain fixed species. Endobionts as symbiotic partners that change valence levels from acute to chronic states, and homotoxicology's staged progression of disease. Emotions are treated as causal energy patterns that alter pH, create muscular armoring, and imprint the blood field. Beagleson's perspectives on emotions echoes older observations from figures such as Claude Bernard, Antoine Béchamp, Gunther Enderlein, and even Edgar Cayce's prediction that a drop of blood could someday diagnose the whole body. Conventional medicine operates within a largely reductionist germ theory framework developed since Pasteur and Koch. Specific pathogens cause specific diseases. Diagnosis centers on cell counts, biochemical markers, imaging of tissue pathology, and genetic or molecular signatures. Treatment prioritizes elimination or suppression of the identified agent or lesion, for example, antibiotics, antivirals, surgery, or chemotherapy, and the body is treated as a collective of separate systems that can be measured and repaired in isolation. Beagleson's model of holographic blood proposes an alternative framework. The terrain is primary. Microbes are adaptive symbionts responding to internal conditions. Disease is an intelligent regulatory process that progresses when natural excretion and inflammation are interrupted. The blood functions as a non-local, field-like information medium closer to ideas in quantum holography or implicate order thinking than to classical hematology, and emotions and structures are not secondary psychosomatic footnotes, but generative forces visible in the blood itself. The holographic blood theory forces a confrontation with the limits of the current paradigm. Mainstream science has delivered extraordinary successes in acute infectious disease and trauma. It has not produced comparable resolutions for the rising tide of chronic conditions. Beagleson's work keeps open the possibility that the blood, and by extension the organism, is more entangled, more informationally dense, and more responsive to the whole of lived experience than the consensus of mainstream science currently believes. That our blood could be the universal storyteller.